We've talked in class about the law, and we've even talked in class about the difference between law and ethics. So let's take a look at them now, recognizing that it's often easier to determine whether something's legal than it is to determine whether or not something's ethical. So the definition of ethics is basically analyzing, evaluating, and promoting some type of correct conduct and or good character according to, and this is pretty important, the best available standards. So that means that ethics will change over time. There's certain core ethics that we maintain throughout time, but circumstances will change, societies will change, and that will mean that we will make different decisions that will be considered ethical at one point and cease to be ethical at another. Basically, we're looking at this kind of correct conduct within society, because the idea of ethics comes from the Greek of ethos, which is character, and that's showing something about the virtuousness of people. And then morality comes from mores or customs, and that's really the rules of conduct within our society. So we have to recognize there's a difference between morals and ethics. Morals are kind of your own personal character. It's the beliefs that you have that are, you believe these things are fundamentally right. A lot of times they're founded in religion. The Ten Commandments is a great reflection of moral behavior. Now, ethics come more from societal standards, and basically they begin with this kind of internal conflict that we have to make a decision that we determine to be right or wrong. These are the kind of questions that ethics are going to ask. What do we do in a given set of circumstances? As a participant in an activity or as part of a profession, what is the behavior that we should have? What's kind of a reasoned position that we could take in a particular situation? And we're going to ask questions of ourselves and questions of ourselves within certain circumstances based on the reflection that we have about our own kind of core values and then how we fit within society as a whole. So, I want you to think about these situations, and we're going to talk about them in class. Let's say that a fight gets broken up by a high school administrator, and he apparently throws one of the students to the ground. And of course, someone catches it on their phone, and it shows up on YouTube. The student says she's injured, but she ends up being suspended. No charges are filed. Now, the administrator's white and the students are black. So the question is, if you're covering this story, do you use the YouTube video in your coverage? And how do you make that determination? Now, another situation we'll talk about in class, let's say an Ohio State athlete has a private Twitter account, but he tweets how much he drank over the weekend. He happens to have allowed you to be a follower, or a friend retweets it. You cover the team. Do you use the information in the tweet in your story? And then finally, let's take the situation of a soldier being killed in Afghanistan, and you're trying to find sources for that story. The family doesn't want to comment. They ask you not to write a story until everybody's been notified. But you go on Facebook, and you go on the soldier's Facebook page, and you find out that there's friends on there that you can contact. Do you contact them? Do you let them know that the family asked that the story not be done? What do you do in that case? These are dilemmas. I mean, there's no right answer in a lot of ethical decisions. There's certainly no single right answer. So what we're going to look at doing here is kind of developing the tools that we need to make ethical decisions, and recognizing that a lot of times they're situational and they can change depending on what situation you find yourself in. So we start to look basically at contemporary professional ethics. What is the duty that you have? To whom do you have that duty? And what values do you need to reflect in performance of that duty? So you have to kind of shift your thinking away from this is the way we do something to this is what I feel we should do, and this is why. The first step in making an ethical evaluation of a situation is, look internally, consult your own conscience. Think about how you would feel if the situation was reversed. Think about why you're making the decision that you are. Who's it going to impact? What are the alternatives? Are there alternatives to what you'd like to do that will accomplish the same goal? And you can hold a public ethical dialogue. You don't have to make these decisions on your own. Talk to people around you. Talk to people in your newsroom. Try to talk to people who have a similar and different viewpoint as you, so that you can get as much a clear picture as possible. Let's kind of look at some of the guidelines that we're going to use for making ethical decisions. And these are guidelines that all of us use for ethical decisions, not just journalists, but journalism ethics certainly apply within this framework. The first one that I'd like to talk about with you is Aristotle's golden mean. And basically, Aristotle's belief was that happiness was the ultimate human good, and that the highest virtue that you could have was to be a citizen of this population that you were in, and the highest practitioner of citizen was a statesman. So really the emphasis was more on the individual within his framework of the golden mean, and making decisions within that framework was what was deemed ethical at the time. So to behave ethically under this framework, you have to know what you're doing. You have to take part in this action for the sake of the action itself. And then you act based on kind of the unchanging character that you possess. Now that's different than what Immanuel Kant's view was of ethics. He looked at it as a categorical imperative. And basically what he meant is that individuals should act based on choices they would make that would become universal law. And that makes the individual an end, not a means. And the best way to recognize this is the golden rule, the idea that we do unto others as we would like them to do unto us. So the goal is it's universal, it can be applied to everyone. And the real focus here is on the actual action itself. Now, slightly different take on that is Utilitarianism by John Stuart Mills. This was his proposal, and I love this one only because I get to use my favorite line from Star Trek, which is the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one, as was stated right before Spock dies in The Wrath of Khan. And basically, it's the consequences of action that help decide ethics. So it's okay to harm one person if the greater good will be served and the benefit of the group will be served. And the fact is that no one person's happiness is any more important than anyone else's. So in this case, the emphasis is on the outcome. Now, William David Ross gave us what's called the pluralistic theory of value, and he said that there's more than one ethical value competing in this decision-making process, and that we're always debating whether something is both good and right. So keeping that in mind, we look at fidelity equals a promise, reparations are amends that you can make, gratitude relates to the previous acts of others, justice is equitability, beneficence is helping others, self-improvement, and you don't want to injure others. So this is kind of a duty and a role that we have. And then we have communitarianism, which in political and social issues, it's basically that the community interest always beats out the individual interest. And you have to weigh rights and responsibilities. So social justice is the most important moral value that you work from. And that in the case of journalism, we can't really separate the political and the economic system of which we are part. And we're looking at evaluating these performances that we are conducting under a shared set of values and determining what is right, balancing what our responsibility is to the greater whole. Now, these are some of the more formulatic ways that we can look at ethical decision-making. And the next few sections, we're going to look at how we can apply these philosophical aspects of ethics to actual ethical situations.